In this video, we will go through your daily routine. Your daily routine is a series of movements that target the muscles from the head to the toes. We'll perform one set of each movement. Think of it as an elongated warm-up. This routine would be great to do on the days that you don't have a workout, or as you build your fitness capacity. If later on in the day, say you do a morning workout, later on in the day you feel like you need to do a little bit more movement, you could go through your daily routine, either part of it or all of it, as an additional bonus of intentional movement. As we go through this series, you'll find that you don't need much space. Some of the movements I'll be moving across the screen. If you don't have that much space, that's perfectly fine. You could do everything stationary. You'll also want some solid surface to sit on. And with this surface, it is ideal that you'd be able to have your feet up off the ground. So that could be something, a high bench, or a chair, or some surface that you put firm cushions on, where it is, again, elevating you so your legs are hanging. If that is not an option, that's okay. You'll just see for some of the movements, it's nice to not have to pull that leg up before performing some of the seated movements. You'll also want either, again, that solid surface or a wall as support. And some of those movements, you may need some support at the beginning and later on not. But again, some solid surface, a wall would be perfect for that support. And then lastly, we have a portion of the daily routine that is ground-based, or where you're laying on some form of a flat surface. So the ground would be fine if you're able to get down to the ground and up off the ground, or if you're at home, you could use a firm bed, a firm couch. If you're at the gym and there's a table, that would be great too. So something that you feel comfortable laying down on and getting up off of. And if that's not something that you're able to do yet, that's perfectly fine. You can omit that portion of the ground-based segment and just know that as your strength and fitness capacity increases, that will be a component that we'll want to add in. All right, so from here, I'll name the movement and perform it. Talk about what makes good form, where we want to feel that the muscles activate, as well as maybe some common compensations, ways that the body might try to perform the movement that isn't optimal, and then we'll perform the movement together. From here, we'll move down to the ground for your front plank. For this movement, we'll start with your elbows on the ground directly beneath your shoulders and your arms straight out as opposed to reaching in. So from this position, we want to make sure you have a straight line through your shoulders, hips, knees, and toes. So you want to make sure you're not sinking down and that you're not hiked up. Once you're in this position, I'm going to have you think about actively pulling your elbows down towards your toes, again, to generate some extra core activation, just like in our high plank position during the walkout. Go ahead, I'll have you get set up here. We'll put 20 seconds on the clock and we'll begin. Next up, we'll go into your high plank to pushback. Sometimes I'd like to call this a yoga pushback because it resembles downward facing dog. So we'll start high plank position just like normal, hands right beneath your shoulders, and then your legs will be straight. And then you'll push back through your palms. You're gonna lift your hips up, and then when you rock forward, you're gonna feel your glutes activate to stop those hips from going lower. So glutes activate, lower core activates. And then again, we push up and back. As you're pushing up and back, we want to make sure that your back isn't rounded, but in a neutral spine as you lift your hips up. This might mean that for a little while, you have to add a little extra bend in through your knees to keep that neutral low back. That's perfectly fine. But if you're able to, we'll start to keep your knees straighter and straighter over time, again, as you develop your low back strength, core strength, and that hamstring flexibility. So let's go ahead, we'll get 20 seconds on the clock, set up in our high plank position, and push back. Next up, we'll reset into our cat and cow. So hands, again, directly beneath our shoulders. This time the knees will move right under the hips. We're gonna go through a slow, controlled change of our spinal position. So we're gonna arch our back, tuck our head, and then sink our belly down as we look up. So cat and cow comes from yoga. We're just gonna move through these two kind of extreme range of motions for the spine in an unloaded and very safe position. So let's go ahead, we'll get set up, hands under the shoulders, knees under the hips. We'll put 20 seconds on the clock and we'll begin. Next up is our bear hold to opposite shoulder tap. So our starting position is very similar to the cat-cow. We're essentially just gonna lift our knees about an inch up off the ground. And then once you're here, slightly pull your palms down. So again, we activate the core, a lot of tension throughout the body, even though we're not moving. And then we're just gonna reach up, tap the opposite shoulder, and reset. And here the goal is to minimize the movement so that we're not swaying side to side, so that it would be very difficult if you didn't know which side is down and which side is up. So let's go ahead, we'll get set up, knees 1 inch above the ground. This is a good one where you can actually look and see if your knees are moving, that means your hips are moving, which means your core isn't stabilizing. So don't be afraid to take a quick peek to see the distance of your knees from the ground. Also, what can happen over time is the knees will creep higher and higher as you're reaching, and that makes it a lot easier. So every now and then, take a quick peek for some feedback as to what's going on up the chain. We'll put 20 seconds on the clock and we'll begin. After our bear hold, we're gonna sink back into our child's pose. So we'll space our knees out a little bit, sink the hips back, stretch up with the hands. So this is a relaxation posture. I'm gonna take a couple deep breaths here. In and out through the nose. Just feeling your body start to relax a little bit. We've got the blood flowing, stretching it out. We'll put 20 seconds on the clock for our child's pose. After our child's pose, we're gonna move into our side plank position. So for this movement, we'll place your elbow underneath your shoulder and we'll stack our feet. If you need to, you're welcome to go 1 foot in front of the other. That would kind of widen your base of support, make it a little bit easier to balance. But if you're able to, we'll stack them. When you're in this position, I want you to think about driving your elbow down towards the side of your foot that's touching the ground. And that just allows you to fire up your obliques, and then the abductor muscle group, so the muscles on the outside of your leg, all these muscles to help support this position so that you're not up off the ground but in this kind of relaxed position, which is actually really dangerous for the shoulder. So we want to protect that by creating stability through the rest of the body. So if you can drive that elbow down, keep everything active, that's ideal. If you're unable or maybe unable to perform this for the full 20 seconds, at any point, feel comfortable bringing this top leg up and over. You can push through that heel, which then will help assist these muscles, these oblique muscles, to maintain the proper position. We'll go ahead and do 20 seconds on one side and then quickly switch over 20 seconds on the other. So elbow right underneath the shoulder, drive it down, use that top leg as needed, and begin. Next up is our glute bridge. For this movement, we'll move onto our back and we're gonna place our heels on the ground, toes up. Anytime you have your feet flat and you're doing your glute bridge, there's a greater likelihood that you're actually pushing through your toes or the front part of your foot. And so we wanna make sure we're maximally activating hamstrings and glutes here. And so by bringing your toes up, you reduce the likelihood of that happening. We also want to make sure that your feet aren't too far away from your body, so you might feel a little scrunched at the beginning. That's okay. As your heels move away from your body, you're actually using hamstrings more, glutes less. Since this is a glute bridge, we really want to target those glutes. From there, we'll lift the hips, short pause, return down just above the ground so that you're not fully relaxing, and then again, right back up. I like to also think about, as I'm lifting up, to kind of pull my heels towards my hips or towards my head even, to get some extra activation. And again, reduce the likelihood of using the knees or the quads. So driving up and back down. When you get to your top position, that's gonna be where you have the straight line from your knees, hips, on down to your shoulders. We wanna make sure that you're not overextending or hyperextending and starting to use the low back. So just that nice straight line. Pause at the top. You wanna feel your core and your glutes activate to stop that movement. And then again, control back down. We're gonna go ahead and put 20 seconds on the clock for our glute bridges. After our glute bridges, we'll go into your shoulder flexion. So the starting position is just essentially bringing your hips down from that glute bridge, relaxing your toes down. We'll bring pinkies touching the ground, so thumbs are up. And then we're gonna reach up overhead, tap our thumbs, and return back to the starting position. As you're reaching up, we wanna make sure that you're not shrugging to elevate those thumbs to the ground, so keeping the shoulders nice and relaxed. And then we also want to make sure that you're not compensating and arching that low back. So this would be really common if you don't have full shoulder mobility. I would much prefer you to stop here than to get that last range of motion because you're arching the low back. So keep some good core tension between your rib cage and your pelvis. So that should all be active to prevent that movement, just to help stabilize the spine. For this movement, we'll go slow and controlled. If you are lacking shoulder mobility, you might find rep by rep that you actually can move a little bit further without compensating or shrugging, and that's a good thing. And then again, week by week, you'll notice some really major changes in your ability to achieve that full range of motion. We'll go ahead and put 20 seconds on the clock for our shoulder flexion. After our shoulder flexion, we're gonna go into our dead bug position. So from here, we essentially wanna bring your knees straight above the hips and arms straight above the shoulders. We're gonna activate our core, especially our lower core, and create some tension in there. So if somebody was gonna step on your core and you'd kind of tense everything up, that's what we wanna achieve here. And then we wanna maintain that tension as you reach out opposite arm, opposite leg, keeping them just above the ground and back up. So I like to imagine that on the way down, I'm pushing something to the ground through my heel and through the back of my hand, and then I'm pulling something back up as I return to that starting position. So again, just imagining some extra resistance so that I'm getting that extra activation. And that will make it easier to stabilize through the spine, as opposed to kind of dropping, maybe accidentally bumping the ground, back up, and then suddenly you realize that your starting position isn't even where it originally started. So this is our alternating dead bug. We'll put 20 seconds on the clock, slow controlled movements through this, really feeling that extra core tension, and then that push back and pull up. And begin. Next up, we have your ankle circles and ups and downs. For this movement, we'll move your ankle through a nice large circle, just like we did with our shoulder circles. So kind of moving through the extreme ranges of motion, movements or ranges of motion we might not achieve every day, but it is great to build or maintain. So we'll do our ankle circles each direction, 10 seconds each way, and then we'll do our ups and downs where we're pointing the toe down and peeling it up. We'll also spend 10 seconds as we perform this movement. From there, we'll switch out and we'll bring the opposite leg up, and again, we'll do 10 seconds of our circles, 10 seconds of our ups and downs. All right, let's go ahead and hug that knee up. Relax the rest of your body onto the mat, and then go ahead and lengthen out that non-moving leg. And begin.